I've got more than 10 half-finished projects sitting around the workshop at various stages of completion. 3D printing, laser cutting projects, CNC projects, machine projects, Arduino programming, the list goes on. And the ideas keep showing up quicker than I can finish them. So I'm running an experiment to see whether or not I can leverage the power of AI to supercharge these processes through to completion. So a quick heads up, this isn't going to be a polished tutorial, it's going to be a live walkthrough of my experience using AI tools. Sometimes it's going to work, and sometimes it's not. I'm starting with Arduino programming because programming seems the most logical fit for AI. AI is a good fit because it has lots of training data where there are examples, and it's a good replacement for my skill. I'm not a native programmer, but I can find snippets of code, make them work, modify them to my use case, then have to go back through and fix it because I broke it, altering it to my use case. So AI is really good at chopping down the time it takes to go from a concept right the way through to a functioning piece of software. Now, I'm a maker. I'm not a corporation. I'm not overly worried about any security vulnerabilities in my code or how poorly the code is written, because being brutally honest, I probably would have had those issues in there if I'd coded it myself. So the project I picked for this first use case is using a Raspberry Pi, and it's something a little bit special for me personally. This Raspberry Pi belonged to my dad. He used to use it for his 3D printing Octoprint instances, and converting this with AI and getting it working in my workflow on a day-to-day basis kind of feels like he's still around helping me out. The first thing to be clear about is AI cannot hold a screwdriver. The whole first part of this project is all on me. I'm having to push the keys, I'm having to plug things in, things that the AI cannot do. The Raspberry Pi I'm turning into a wireless workbench, meaning that the AI can code things and wirelessly send it to this workbench and then program my ESP32 or other Arduino compliant board. And what you're about to see is the condensed version of a 2-hour live stream where I go through the process of setting up the Raspberry Pi and then letting the AI do its thing. So the first thing I did was to get the Raspberry Pi imager and created a USB boot drive using the Raspberry Pi 4 and the Raspberry Pi minimal image. Then I tried to boot the Pi from USB and nothing came up. So I went looking to see what was wrong. I tried to find it on my DHCP logs, but it wasn't there. So I guess I needed to see what the screen was telling me as to why it wasn't booting. But there was a problem. I didn't have a mini HDMI cable that I could plug into the Pi, then put it up onto a monitor. So I had to go hunting for that. Steve, you're an absolute... I've just spotted something. I've just spotted a cable. I've just spotted a micro HDMI cable. After finding the cable and plugging it in, it turned out the Pi needed its bootloader updating. In its current form, it was attempting to boot off the SD card, and the bootloader needed to be reflashed so that it would choose the USB port and be able to use the USB drive that we just created. This is a simple fix just by going to the utility Raspberry Pi images, and there is one there specifically for updating the bootloader to boot from USB as opposed to SD card. After booting the SD card that we just created, it flashes up a green screen telling you that the flash process is complete. I then swapped out the SD card with the USB drive and it started up. Once that was all sorted out, the Pi booted from USB, and everything up until this point is all me, right? It's time now to get into the AI piece. My AI agent, Frank, is a Hermes agent. Hermes is a harness that you plug an LLM into, and for our use case we're using the OpenAI LLM, specifically the GPT 5.4-mini model. And I'm using that model because it's token efficient, it's relatively inexpensive by comparison to some of the higher tier, more deep thinking models. The first task that I set up was for Frank to get the Raspberry Pi accessible via its hostname. And that's done by using something called MDNS, whereby you can type in the local host name of the device .local, and devices on the network can discover it. So I updated the environment files with the Raspberry Pi's current IP address, the username, and the password, so I didn't have to type it into the Telegram chat window, which is how I'm choosing to interface with Frank. I asked Frank to log in via Secure Shell or SSH and update the MDNS or set it up so that we can access it via its hostname. And lo and behold, Frank logged in, configured MDNS, and it's now accessible. That's super cool. The second task was to get installed the Universal Embedded Workbench. This is a project on GitHub by a user called Sensor IoT. This is curated by another YouTuber called Andreas. He's the guy with the Swiss accent. I'll leave a link to Andreas's channel where you can see all of his setup for his AI agent using Claude. So I told Frank that the workbench was built using Claude and that you may need to rework things. And I asked him to go ahead and install it. And my prompt was somewhat vague. This part wasn't planned. The first prompt for Frank was too vague. Frank went ahead and tried to install the workbench locally on his machine, not on the Raspberry Pi. Now, I didn't catch this initially, but I did notice there was an error partway through where Frank was saying that he didn't have the right tools and was unable to do X, Y, Z. And that message alone tipped me off to the fact that he was trying to install locally instead of onto the Raspberry Pi. So this proves something important. AI agents are unreliable by default. Without a specific, well-scoped prompt and guardrails, they can go somewhere you didn't intend. And you might not find out until something breaks. It's the whole sort of adage of trash in, trash out. The fix was simple. I sent a steer command to tell Frank, hang on, whoa, stop. You're doing something wrong. You need to install it on the Pi, not locally. That steer command was enough to nudge Frank in the right direction, and he went off and installed it, and it worked. So we've got MDNS set up, and that means that we've got a reliable way of communicating with the Raspberry Pi if the IP address changes. We've got the workbench installed. Now it's time to test out whether this actually works. So I gave Frank a prompt of creating the classic Hello World project of blinking an LED, but with a twist. I asked Frank to flash the LED with a Morse code message, SOS, and left it at that. Frank went off, did a bit of research, coded it, and then uploaded it to the Raspberry Pi, and it worked. I also got Frank to save the file on a share drive that we can both access, and I can go off and inspect the code. Now, in this example, Frank didn't comment the code, and depending upon your use case, you might want to comment the code or you might not. Just remember that any text that your LLM outputs counts towards your token usage, specifically your output tokens. The more output tokens you spend, the more expensive the project is going to become because your output tokens cost more than your input tokens. But if you want to validate what the code is doing, by all means, turn on or tell your AI agent to add detailed comments so you can see what the code is trying to do. So this is just the beginning. This Raspberry Pi setup is now going to enable me to write a definition document or a specification document for the project itself. I'm still the human directing the project. I'm going to be specifying what the project's going to do, what things it's going to interface with, what pins on the microcontroller it's going to work with. But I'm going to then leave the coding up to the AI agent And hopefully I can either complete the project in quick time, or I can be doing something else while it's working away. So once I've gone past integrating programming into the overall workflow, I'm interested to see what else I can use AI for within the makerspace, whether that be 3D printing, laser cutting, CNC. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you've got an idea that AI could potentially fast track a project through to completion, I'd like to hear about it. And yes, AI is a very controversial topic. It's very polarizing. For me, for my use case, ethically, I think I'm okay because the things it's replacing are things that I would be doing myself. And it's advancing me through my projects, and hopefully we're going to have less stuff on the bench. So until next time, have fun, be safe, and keep making.